Good afternoon, fellow Patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Brought to you once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Good afternoon, fellow Patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio. Today, we have a packed house. First, massive wins here nationally for Patriots and the Constitution. Wins here locally and Europe on the edge. And also today we have with us Bill Jasper, again, the senior editor at the New American Magazine. We're going to be talking about the border crisis, but something that he discovered 40 years ago that we are going to bring back now into today in the context of what J.R. Nyquist broke about a month ago here on Patriot Radio about the plan to invade the United States by China and Russia. Well, with the summer of harvest that we have coming up here, remember, no fear. We were made for this. Now, this summer of harvest we've been doing here at On Fire Ministries and throughout the region is not just us. It is a summer of harvest for the entire church. And I hope that your church is a part of it and continues to evangelize in the community and throughout the Inland Northwest, because the answer to everything that we're going to be talking about today is Jesus Christ. Also, remember to follow us on Rumble, Patriot Radio US. You can subscribe to us and follow us on Telegram for real-time intelligence updates, also some events that are coming up as well. And remember that we have a lot of great partners that we work with. For example, Epoch Times, you can use promo code Patriot Radio, and you get to support two great causes. You can also find out more about your health and what you can do about it at zstacklife.com/Patriot Radio. We have a lot of partners, like I said, that understand the times. And if you don't know about Dr. Zelenko and his legacy, please take a look at it. I believe he saved a lot of lives and made us all healthier anyway. And I believe, too, that in this time, physical health is just as important as mental health. And obviously, spiritual health is the most important thing. But all three are needed together for what's about to happen here as the left, the Marxists, and the jihadis get very, very anxious. In fact, we can talk today about a lot of victories, and we are going to talk about a lot of victories. In fact, it's victory after victory after victory. I want to give a context before I get into the Bible teaching. The context of all of this is that this is the year of the great exposing. Evil is going to be exposed, and then you're going to see it removed. So that's the context of everything that we're about to talk about. And some of these stories flew under the radar because of the bigger media stories that came out this week regarding President Trump and President Biden. But they were very important in this respect. One of them in particular, been waiting over 30 years for it. And it has the potential to have more impact than even Roe versus Wade being overturned. You heard that right. That's kind of a bold statement, but if you don't understand the way that the government actually works, you may miss this. We're going to spend a little bit of time on that here in a second. And the Bible teaching today is Ephesians 4:13. And for everybody that doesn't know, if you walk through Ephesians 1-6, you understand the times that we're in, and you understand what God is doing in this time. So Ephesians 4:13, until we all attain. So he's saying, Paul is, and remember, he's writing this 60 AD, maybe a little bit after. we're talking 30 years after the time of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of faith. So he's talking about the fivefold ministry: apostles, prophets, evangelists, teachers, pastors. Fivefold ministry is needed for building up the body of Christ until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a mature man, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of Christ. We haven't attained that. So obviously the fivefold ministry is still needed to build up the church. But this key point that I want to hone in on right now is unity. The unity in the body. The unity comes through the Spirit. And if we're really seeking the face of Christ, then we don't have our own denominations and our own territory. It's one body of Jesus Christ that is bent on expanding the kingdom. The founding fathers believed this. In fact, 1643, the Articles of Confederation of the United Colonies said in its first two lines, whereas we all came into these parts with one and the same end and aim, to expand the kingdom of Jesus Christ and enjoy the liberties of the gospel in purity and peace. Okay, so we know the original intent of the founders of this country was for all of us to work in this same direction. My question is, are we all going to come together to do that? Because it's not God who votes. We do. And that brings us now to the good versus evil segment. Yuval Noah Harari, we could probably put him on every single show. But this one was particularly weird, okay? Yuval Noah Harari is celebrating the superpowers of humanity. And what is the superpower? Fiction? Go ahead and roll the clip.
The ability to believe in fiction is really the superpower of humanity. This is why we control the world. Chimpanzees can cooperate on the level of, say, 50 chimpanzees, or 100 chimpanzees can work together to a common goal. Humans can cooperate on the level of millions. How do we do that? By inventing and believing fictional stories.
So he is saying,
most obvious in the case of religion,
that we all should create deception to control each other. That sounds like Satan to me, but go ahead. Please continue.
People to cooperate on a common project, whether it's building a cathedral or a hospital or fighting a holy war, by telling them
the holy war.
Fictional story. You can't do that with chimps. You can never convince a group of chimps to cooperate by promising to them that if you do this, after you die, you go to chimpanzee heaven, and there you receive lots of bananas and coconuts. So now do this. No chimpanzee will ever believe such a story. We believe such stories, so we rule the world.
That was one of the most intellectually, and I'm going to use this word in the most intentional definition of the English, retarded things I have ever heard. First of all, the logical fallacy that deception is good, that's where we start. The second, that somehow that everybody is engaging in a holy war. Now, there's only really one religion that has that enshrined, and that is Islam. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But it's always these folks, and there's folks here locally that do this too. You know, you guys are bent on a holy war when you say dominion. Blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't make any sense. Jesus Christ has already conquered the earth. We're just walking it out. Whether you want to believe that or not, Jesus believes it. So do I. And so does everybody else that's a Christian. Praise the Lord. But what I really want to hone in on here too with Yuval Noah Harari, he's giving the excuse for manipulation and control to bring about good as he sees it. Who determines that? Yuval and his little Patriot buddies? This is the lie of Satan, that somehow humanity missed out on something. Satan knows the answer, and if you want to know the secret, you follow him. When in fact, Jesus Christ said, I have come and revealed all that is hidden, and I've revealed all the secret, and you have access to them through Christ Jesus. And that's the difference between the two ideologies of globalism and nationalism in a nutshell. And that brings us now to your daily intelligence briefing, coming to us from the globalist front.
Those naughty globalists.
Well, once again, Klaus Schwab, quote, to drive future economic growth, we must embrace innovation and force the collaboration across sectors, regions, nations, and cultures to create a more peaceful, inclusive, sustainable, and resilient future. At this critical juncture, the active participation of all stakeholders is essential to ensure a sustainable development path. Again, according to whose standard? Klaus Schwab? Now, Klaus Schwab's like going to force us all to collaborate with him in his weird Star Wars Emperor outfit? How about no thank you? Also on the globalist front, exposed how climate racketeers aim to force us into smart gulags. These are called smart cities, if you've never heard of this. 15-minute cities and predictions of moving rural citizens to cities have been in the works for at least 30 years. Well, actually longer than that, because Mao Zedong is who really in modern times brought this to the fore, trying to move people into cities. And by the way, when they did the Great Leap Forward, I think it was something like 100 billion people died as a result of it. So what they want to do is create the artifice of freedom. Give you a little apartment, a little 300 square foot place you can sleep and eat maybe a little bit and play video games and be plugged into artificial intelligence and in artificial reality. And it's interesting how close the Matrix movie is to what these folks are trying to plan. And that brings us now to the China front. In the West Philippine Sea, Chinese aircraft carrier spotted off Luzon. A Chinese aircraft carrier was spotted off the western part of Luzon Island in what a Filipino security expert deemed a calculated move to punish Manila for its strategic actions in the West Philippine Sea dispute. In other words, China is beginning to project force. Well, at some point, the United States needs to step forward and back its allies in the Pacific as RIMPAC started, one of the largest exercises in the Pacific. And again, under the guise of these exercises, the United States is moving supplies forward to operating bases and airfields in the Pacific Islands. So this is just, again, continued escalation toward what very clearly looks like World War III. And that brings us now to the Middle East front. On the heels of what many experts and myself believe is the preparations for a war in Lebanon and a broader regional war, there is also division now fomenting between the Turks and the Syrians. We don't want Syrian refugees in Turkey. The ethnic conflict is going from bad to worse. And Europeans, particularly, and Americans often forget just how many Syrians have moved to Turkey since the Syrian civil war started in 2011. This just shows more division and more unrest here. Interestingly enough, it talks about in 2nd Esdras, which is in the 1611 King James Version of the Bible, a conflict which in what appears to be Turkey, between Turkey, Syria, and Iran. We're going to keep watching this very closely. Coming to us from a great site, OSINT Defender, the Israeli Defense Force released a new evacuation order today for Khan Yunis as Israeli forces attempt to finish major combat operations in Gaza by mid-July. And again, many people believe that is because they're going to shift north to Lebanon. That brings us now to the European and the Russian front. Tensions are high throughout Europe as Islamic immigrants, particularly, and other immigrants are causing chaos in various countries. Thousands of Germans gather at a park where a 20-year-old Polish-Greek migrant, Philippos Sanas, was beaten to death by a youth gang for wearing a large cross on his chest. The main perpetrator is an 18-year-old Syrian repeat offender who arrived in 2016 as an asylum seeker, which is why Marine Le Pen is winning in France and crushed all of her other opponents and said this, quote, those connected to Islamist ideology must be stripped of their nationality and expelled. The French who adopt the ideology of the enemy must be punished. Radical mosques will be shut down and the Muslim Brotherhood will be dissolved, end quote. Wow, that is a powerful statement. And her national party there is gaining a huge amount of momentum, but really is a bellwether for the feeling across most of Eastern and Western Europe. And that brings us to the Russian border and the conflict with Ukraine. The Russian Mad Max tactics along the front line using motorbikes are the latest form of suicide. Now, this offensive, this so-called offensive in the Kharkov region was stopped cold, but the Russians are sending wave after wave. Now, this is the same tactic they used in World War I, which actually led to a revolution, or helped to lead to a revolution. They used it in World War II, and now they're using it here. But the problem is the Ukrainians are indeed holding the line. And again, this is an objective analysis. People get all bent out of shape when you're objective about this. But the losses of the Russians, and this is the point, are coming to such a place where the Russians may actually get desperate. And that then involves all of us. And that's the point of all of what I'm talking about here, is the Ukrainians actually are doing a great job of defending and holding the line against some of these Russian offensives. And the Russians are losing a ton of armor and a ton of troops. That's, again, objective. There, I've posted on Twitter the objective analysis of the Russian storage facilities and the visually confirmed destruction of Russian tanks and other armor, and also of Russian personnel. These are not speculation, but they give us but they're not like pinpoint detail, but they do give us a pretty good window. And again, my point here is that as the Russians become more desperate, they become more dangerous. And that's what we should all be paying attention to, because it really does appear that the globalists are not allowing one side to win. And that is because I believe they want this to continue on as a precursor for World War III. And in fact, years later, we're probably going to say World War III started right during COVID and during also this invasion of Ukraine. Remember, you can bookmark this episode. 10 years from now, we can look back at it and see if it's accurate. And that brings us now to Finland. Will open 15 of its military bases for potential use by U.S. forces under the terms of the Defense Cooperation Agreement. The Finnish Parliament unanimously approved the Defense Cooperation Agreement between Finland and the United States. And again, Finland right on the border with Russia, so more provocation and more buildup there in the Baltics. And that brings us now to a very interesting force protection condition level raise in Europe. A majority of U.S. military bases under the United States European Command in Spain, Germany, Italy, Bulgaria, Poland, and Romania have now been placed on a heightened alert with their force protection condition being raised to Charlie. The reason is still unknown. And at least as of today, it is also still unknown, although we're going to check breaking news here when our guest comes on. And that brings us now to the Central American front. Panama's new president promises to reduce Darien Gap migration. Jose Raul Molino, who appears to be a rabid anti-communist, was inaugurated Monday and immediately acted to fulfill his campaign promise of reducing illegal immigration through the dangerous Darien Gap. Seems like Trump is getting some allies put in place ahead of time. We cannot continue financing the economic and social costs that massive illegal immigration generates for the country, along with the consequent connection, listen to this, of international criminal organizations, he said during an inaugural speech. And the point here is that he understands that not just drug trafficking is happening for the Darien Gap, but worse, human trafficking. Also, out of Cuba, images captured from space show the growth of Cuba's electronic eavesdropping stations that are believed to be linked to China. including new construction of a previously unreported site about 70 miles from the U.S. naval base at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. It does look like Chinese are putting listening posts right on our doorstep. That brings us now to the South American front. Javier Milei has disbanded the Ministry of Women and fired 85% of its employees as he continues his chainsaw policies through the government. This is so encouraging to me. Can you imagine? I want you to visualize this happening in America, where all of this pork waste, ridiculous, asinine departments and agencies are slashed. Wow, doing a great job down there in Argentina. That brings us now to the national front. Eric Prince and General Mike Flynn ask a very important question. After the failed debate performance of Joe Biden, where now everybody knows, look, we all knew ahead of time, but clearly, if you didn't know, Joe Biden was suffering from significant cognitive impairment, then you need to really question your media sources, because the rest of us did know. So that said, now everybody knows in the debate, and that guy was and is Joe Biden's doctor. So the question becomes, why has he been lying to the American people? Why has he been lying to the world? And when will he be held accountable for doing that? Also, Oakland corruption scandal. And pay attention to this. This is going to expand beyond Oakland, by the way. Oakland corruption scandal. Democrat Oakland Mayor Sheng Tao and government officials allegedly funded by sex trafficking drug ring. Busted. I'm going to let that sit there for a second. So connected to the highest politicians in California? We will see. Also, from the Gateway Pundit, almost 200 pages of Epstein grand jury documents released. Now, this is Monday. Now, remember, evil's being exposed. So Monday, you had the Trump immunity thing come out, and then you had the Epstein grand jury documents released. They show that Epstein raped teenage girls as young as 14 at his Palm Beach mansion, and there's video, too, there. There's going to be more coming out, and we're going to cover this as more comes out here over the following weeks. But on a positive note, U.S. Marshals find 200 missing children during Operation We Will Find You Too. They've rescued over 200 missing children and endangered children during a 6-week operation. The agency announced that from May 20th to June 24th, rescued those children and also located 25 missing children as well. And that is just a good news story all the way around right there. Also, another win. Jury rules in favor of freedom. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee ordered to pay almost $700,000 to employee fired for refusing COVID vaccine. You're going to see more of these lawsuits being won, and it is going to have a ripple effect throughout the economy and also throughout policies. Also, now confirmed from WorldNet Daily, the FBI security clearances were suspended for agents with wrong beliefs. A report from the Daily Signal explained that Tristan Levitt, the chief of Empower Oversight, told Congress on behalf of the whistleblower, the client, a registered Democrat, witnessed firsthand as an SSA, a supervisory special agent. The FBI Security Division improperly suspended or revoked employees' security clearances whose political views, medical views, or even ethnicity were questioned by the Security Division. There it is. No conspiracy theory. More whistleblowers. By the way, whistleblowers really important because they can change the direction. I remember when they came after yours truly for blowing the whistle on this egregious abuse down in Nevada of the Bundy family. And it's important for elected leaders to stand in this gap, take whistleblower testimony, and then hold people accountable. And from Epoch Times, the judge now, so Trump, immune from prosecution for official action. There are several wins here that I want to go through. The judge, first of all, has now delayed the sentencing in the New York case. And it looks like it's being delayed till September and probably until after the election, just based on how these things normally go. Also, Clarence Thomas, in a concurring opinion, wrote this: a private citizen cannot criminally prosecute anyone, let alone a former president. In other words, questioning Jack Smith's authority to even be in the position he's in. So that's going to be a bombshell coming. I foresee Jack Smith out. And, because this sent the left into apoplexy, that they couldn't put Trump in prison, there is a HuffPost headline. Now, remember, the Huffington Post is who called certain particular people domestic terrorists. Okay? I want you to hear what they actually put in their headlines, though. Huffington Post, probably one of the most dangerous headlines, according to the Western Journal, and I agree with that. Supreme Court gives Joe Biden the legal okay to assassinate Donald Trump. How horrendous that is to even put something like that up on their site. This reprehensible headline. Wow. It's interesting that the import of the decision regarding presidential immunity is this, and this is from this Western Journal article, quote, when a president takes action in an official capacity, that president need not fear the Soviet-style tactics of intimidation and retribution presently employed against Trump by Democrat Party operatives. And it's not just against Trump. The Democrat Party does this against anybody that they fear is a true American and Christian patriot, period. And that brings us to one of the funnier wins here. Biden campaign grants Trump's communications advisor, Stephen Chung, access to private internal call using his official Trump campaign email. He was wide open about it. They let him in. And here is his analysis of it. Quote, this Biden campaign call is the saddest thing I've ever listened to. They have given up. Yes, they have, because they got caught. Not so good news, but also a little bit. I think there's good that's going to come out of this. Steve Bannon reported to jail. Bannon is willing to go to prison to save his country. What are you prepared to do? And that's a great question from Sam Faddis, and I think one that we could take to the dinner table tonight and ask each other. But wait, there's more. More wins. Another win. The United States Supreme Court ruled that the Justice Department overstepped charging hundreds of people with obstruction in the January 6th Capitol riot. In other words, Trump is found immune regarding J6. Now, the Supreme Court is saying that the Justice Department overstepped with the obstruction charges. Now we can see hundreds of cases overturned as a result of this, or part of those cases overturned. That is amazing. What a great win. But there is even more. The Texas Supreme Court upheld SB 14, a law protecting children from dangerous gender confusion procedures by prohibiting puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and mutilative surgeries on minors. In Texas, great job, Attorney General Ken Paxton. More states need to be doing this and protecting our children. And then probably the most gigantic decision of the last week, bigger than even the immunity decision. In a major blow to the unelected administrative state. Now, I want you to understand this. We shouldn't be seeking term limits for politicians. We should be seeking term limits for bureaucrats, because these unelected bureaucrats have been given power over the last 50 years to run roughshod over American businesses and the American taxpayer and Christians, arbitrarily doing things. So the day before this decision came out, the United States Supreme Court ruled that it is a violation of the right to trial by jury to use administrative law judges to kind of be the sole arbiter of cases against a government agency. Now, the Supreme Court then followed it up by overturning something called the Chevron Doctrine. Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo. Not the best names to remember, but just remember this. The Chevron Doctrine was overturned. And here's what the Chevron Doctrine was. When a bureaucrat interpreted a law they were given deference to their interpretation. So what we would see in the legislature all the time is bureaucrats reinterpreting the law to bring the hammer down on hardworking Americans. Everything from private property rights to how you ran your business. Well, that now has been overturned. They no longer have that deference. And the import of this is that literally tens of thousands of cases now are going to be brought to court to overturn these arbitrary and oftentimes capricious, sometimes totally made up out of whole cloth interpretations by these agency bureaucrats. And so not only can they not use their own administrative law judges, now they can't do their own interpretation. This is a huge win steering things back toward the Constitution of the United States of America. Also, we have some wins we need to talk about on the readout front. The Supreme Court just ruled that cities can enforce bans on homeless people sleeping outside. My question is, will Spokane follow? A lot of local businesses right now are very upset about the situation in Spokane, and rightfully so, because a lot of these folks are being bussed in. Now, also on the readout front, after much pressure, the Coeur d'Alene Chamber of Commerce finally relented and is allowing religious symbols, crosses, let's be blunt, at the 4th of July parade. So they had banned crosses. Now they're going to allow crosses at the 4th of July parade. But the whole point is that this came up to begin with. But Heather Scott and many others, the Idaho Tribune did a great job bringing attention to this. The KC Spectator as well, and Idaho Family PC. And there is now a great win preserving the right of freedom of religious expression. Great job over there in Idaho, holding the line. Wow, that's a lot of wins, and I just did barely scratch the surface. We're going to remember July 1st for a long time, as well as July 4th, and that's the briefing. Remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. Thank you to everybody that has been praying for us. Remember to subscribe to us on Rumble, Patriot Radio US, and follow us on Telegram for real-time intelligence reports. You don't have to doom scroll. We do that for you. And now our guest today, Bill Jasper. He's the senior editor of the New American magazine. He's an expert on the sordid history of the American border and has been covering it for over 40 years. Bill, it's great to have you back on Patriot Radio. Thanks for joining us again.
Always a pleasure, Matt.
Well, we spent quite a bit of time on the Pope last time. Now we're shifting to the southern border. You have been covering this. I brought up J.R. Nyquist and his video, and if we could get that ready to play, actually, I'll just give you a little bit of a heads up there. I would like you to just we're going to watch that video and then react to it. But first, this plan of invading the United States has actually been in the works for a very long time.
Yes, for decades, actually. And I believe last time we talked about my experience down on the border. In the 80s, I began going down on the U.S. southern border, the U.S.-Mexico border, early in the 80s, 81, 82, and then began in 83, 84, and on for the next 5 years, taking cameras and film crews down there, which resulted in all of it put together in 1987 and 88. We finally came out with it in 88, Out of Control, the Immigration Invasion. But during my which is an hour-long documentary. And during my many trips to the border, frequently I would be with Border Patrol, just traveling along with them. And on several of them, I was there when they apprehended dozens, and in one case, over 200 Chinese coming across the border. And as I explained, the Chinese and others that weren't Mexicans were designated as OTMs, other than Mexican. And if they were OTMs, they couldn't just be put back across the border. Most people don't realize that with the many Mexicans coming across the border, they just load them up on buses, they take them back down there, put them through the turnstiles, and they'd go back into Mexico. And some of them, and you'll even see them in the video, they're saying, "Oh, see you later today." You know, they just go across the border and hook up with whomever they were going to be coming across with, and later in the day they'd be coming across again. But when it came to the Chinese, I asked the Border Patrol on a couple of occasions, "So where are you taking these people?" And they were either taking them to Los Angeles or San Francisco. They would process them, which meant that they would take down supposedly their name and information, but of course most of them did not have any identification, so they could give any name they want. And then they would release them, and they would tell them, "Okay, you have to be back here in court on a certain date for your court date." And I asked, "How often do they show up?" They said, "Almost never." So it was known even back then that that this was totally a ruse, that nothing was really going to be done there. Now, the Chinese Communist Party obviously knew what was happening, and they began infiltrating people in across the border in major numbers. So we don't know over the past 30, 40 years how many moles, how many deep agents they have placed in this country. And of course, now it has exponentially exploded with thousands, tens of thousands coming across the border. And what happens if and when those people who have been infiltrated into the country are given the signal and they go to prearranged locations where arms caches, explosives, other biological weapons, etc., have been stored for them, and they start wreaking the havoc that they are sent here to do. And we know from at least half a dozen different reports on the East Coast and the West Coast of actual arms shipments, containers carrying thousands of weapons, rifles, grenade launchers, shoulder-fired missiles, that have been apprehended by the CPB or other agencies, the ATF. And I submit it's speculation, but informed speculation on my part, because I've been down at the port of Long Beach, port of Los Angeles, port of San Francisco, any place along the border, port of San Diego, and you see thousands and thousands of containers coming in, and how often are they checked? Not even 1 in 1,000 is actually checked.
Yeah, it's incredible. We see this, and we know it's happening, and we'll get to kind of what we should be doing about it. But I'd like you to go into a little bit more depth on the fact that this is not something that is just happenstance. These folks are just looking for a better life. There is an intent here. There is a plan here, and then we're going to roll J.R. Nyquist.
Yes, well, we know that there are undoubtedly many Chinese who don't want to live in a communist country and who will do whatever they can to come here. So undoubtedly many of the folks who have come here from China are genuine immigrants who want to become Americans. However, we have to face a very hard fact, and that is that China is the most totalitarian country in the world, aside from maybe North Korea. And they control everything in your life there, what you can see, what you can read, what you can say. Their social credit system is truly Orwellian. And to get out of China is not easy. And for those people who come here, we have to assume that a fair number of them have actually been sent here by the government. They know how porous our system is. And if you were planning on taking control of this country, you would do the same thing. You would infiltrate as many of your agents strategically into key parts of the country. And that's what they have been doing. And we have to assume that many of the people who have come here, just as we saw during the Cold War in quite a number of cases where Soviet moles were discovered in our country, many of them, their parents had come here a generation before, and they had been raised up here, so they spoke the language, they could appear to be Americans, and the same thing we see today, not only from China, but from Russia and other communist and former communist countries.
So some background information before we play the video. Stanislav Lunev was a defector from the Soviet Union. He was a member of the GRU. It's basically the military intelligence arm of the Soviets. And he came here in the early 1990s, and he testified before Congress in 2000 that there were suitcase nuclear weapons that were unaccounted for here in the United States. That was confirmed by General Lebed. And then I hear this, which was not part of the congressional testimony, but which was testimony given to J.R. Nyquist. Go ahead and roll the clip. What you are about to hear is J.R. Nyquist revealing how Russia and China are going to invade the United States of America.
The more recent information is that the order has come down from Beijing to infiltrate 250,000 Chinese officers and men as civilians into the United States through our open borders.
Migrants from China are now the fastest growing group of people entering the United States illegally.
Compared to last year, they're already seeing a 900% spike in Chinese national apprehension.
The defector, Colonel Stanislav Lunev, he was the highest ranking GRU defector to the United States. I talked to him about this border problem. I said, well, what is this? Is there an invasion strategy? And he told me, he said, yes. When he was at the GRU, right at the end of the Cold War, Russia and China had got together. They had signed a treaty to unite their intelligence services together, but they'd also signed a treaty about a future war, a secret treaty, that in the future they would both be at war with the United States. Russia would occupy Alaska and parts of Canada, and China would get the lower 48 states with other countries invited in for looting rights. I said, well, how would this invasion work with nuclear weapons and all? And he said, it works on the basis of the German invasion of Norway in 1940. They performed an invasion through the British Navy into there by using merchant ships that had secretly been loaded with troops. They had pre-positioned weapons inside Norway. They would enter the country through Sweden as tourists. They would put on their uniforms, get their guns, go to an airfield or port, take it over so the planes and ships could arrive carrying the troops. I mean, they literally sailed right past the British Navy doing this. And it was a surprise invasion. It was an infiltration invasion. And what Lunev told me was that this is how the Russians and their Chinese allies conceive of a future war against America. They would infiltrate their army into the United States before actual war was declared.
I cannot believe what I just saw and what I just heard. I've studied communist doctrine for over 30 years. I have never heard this. This brings crystal clarity to the border crisis in America and what we need to do to solve it. This is an intentional plan by our enemies to invade the United States of America in preparation for World War III. And you heard it from an expert who had direct knowledge and who had talked to a Soviet defector. And oh, by the way, this plan was put into fruition after the fall of the Soviet Union. They've been working together the entire time. This is absolutely incredible. Share this. We need to make this a national news story. Bill Jasper, your reaction.
Well, this is a very, very disturbing revelation. I was aware of Stanislav Lunev. I had not heard this testimony of his before. And it's worth noting that the GRU, which is the general staff of the military directorate, which was a Soviet institution, is the only intelligence apparatus of the Soviet Union that didn't change its name and that kept its continuity. Now, we know with the KGB, more infamous, that it went through a transition. They changed the name, and essentially the KGB remained the same, but it changed its name to the FSB, and there was kind of a reorganization of it. But with the supposed collapse of the Soviet Union, one would expect that the GRU would also have been gone through some kind of change. It did not. And this is important. Many of during the Cold War, just following World War II, for instance, Alger Hiss, the most infamous of Soviet moles, communist agents in the U.S. government, was run by the GRU, not by the KGB at that time. And the same with many of the atom bomb spies, Oppenheimer and the rest of the gang that were working with him on the Manhattan Project that gave our secrets to the communists. They were working for the GRU. And so this is the same organization now which is carrying out the plans in coordination with China to infiltrate moles in massive numbers into the United States to carry out warfare against us.
Well, one of the key parts of this infiltration is to pre-position weapons, uniforms, and provisions here in the United States under the guise of business manufacturing in large manufacturing facilities. It makes you wonder if any investigation has ever been really done into some of these Chinese-owned corporations that have manufacturing facilities, that have storage facilities, that have distribution facilities here in the United States of America. And I know you can shine a little bit of light on it. You just kind of touched on it. There have been shipments that have been intercepted, but let's go into a little bit more depth.
Well, yes. So I could just, for instance, point out a couple of incidents. Many of your viewers would have seen Lethal Weapon 4, the Mel Gibson, Danny Glover cop action movie. Remember, that one starts out with a shipload of Chinese migrants crashing on the shore around California, around Los Angeles. Actually, that was based on the Golden Venture incident, which occurred on the other side of our country in New York, where the Golden Venture, which was a smuggling vehicle bringing Chinese to the United States, ran aground off of the New York coast there. And so they used that as part of this story. Well, how many times has then where they weren't caught, where it wasn't brought to light? We don't know. But there were other incidents. For instance, here's one from the Los Angeles Times of March 15, 1997. U.S. agents seize smuggled arms. U.S. border agents have seized 2 truckloads of military assault rifles and grenade launchers that were mysteriously smuggled into this country through the port of Long Beach and were addressed to Mexico City, officials said. Another one here from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. This is from their official website from just a couple of years ago. This is from June 26 of 2020. In Louisville, Kentucky, at the Express Consignment Operations Hub in Louisville, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CPB officers seized a shipment from China that contained over 10,000 assault weapons parts being smuggled into the country. The ship was seized on May 22nd. Officers inspected the item, which was arriving from Shenzhen, China, destined for residents in Melbourne, Florida. The parcel was manifested as containing 100 steel pin samples. This is a common practice of smugglers manifesting the contraband as a harmless or legitimate commodity in hopes of eluding further examination. This was in a news release from the CPB. Another one here from, oops, I lost the my other link here. We have reported on these a number of times also in the New American Magazine. Something of this importance comes in, and maybe AP or the New York Times or somebody mention it, and then, just another smuggling incident. And yet, whenever we see an arrest or a ATF assault on some private person, they say, oh, a massive arsenal was found. They find a couple of guns and several thousand rounds of ammunition, which every American should have if you're going to practice and you're going to keep have a viable operation of your arms. You need to have a so-called arsenal, that is several guns and several thousand rounds of ammunition. But here we have, time and again, thousands of arms illegally smuggled in by an avowed enemy, and it's kind of ho-hum, oh well, yeah. Let's go on to the rest of the news.
So have you heard, or do you have any information on manufacturing facilities, distribution facilities inside the United States that might be in or have been investigated for storing these things?
Well, similar, but very, very recent. I'm sure you recall just a few months ago, actually, I think 3 months ago, it was in April, in California, an alleged bioweapons lab was discovered. And this was a Chinese-operated and owned facility, which was just accidentally found by a health inspector from the county who had complaints, and they went and visited this area. And it turned out that there were all kinds of biological specimens that were dangerous there, that indicated there could be a biological weapons lab there. It was not registered as any kind of medical facility, and it shows that it is very easy for Chinese individuals, and particularly backed by state-owned corporations in China, to set up shop here and to conduct business and to actually manufacture perhaps biological weapons that could, if not cause deadly impact on the United States, at least cause massive sickness and disrupt our whole health regimen here. So those are just a few of the cases. The example of the balloon flying across the United States and the President of the United States just allowing that to happen and not shooting it down when he had ample time to do so. We look at every year the U.S.-China Commission of Congress gives reports on the various Chinese corporations that are involved here, that are on our that are on the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ that shouldn't be. And some of them have been removed in times past, but because the globalists in Wall Street, the Carlyle Group, the BlackRock, and all of the big guys, the big investors, keep pushing for it with their CCP allies, we have Chinese corporations operating and buying up many of our companies and properties here in the United States. And again, unless the American people really rise up, we saw it during the Trump administration. Many of the Democrats, in fact, even the only reason that President Joe Biden and his administration have started in the last year or so announcing that they were going to get tough on China is because they perceive that the vast majority of Americans are up in arms over this. And so they have to mollify the public, and they have done very minimal things, just as they have on the border, when they see that people are getting angry enough, upset enough that it's going to cost them. And so this is what we have to do. We have to constantly fight. Eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. And we have to be vigilant, and we have to be vocal.
Bill Jasper, thank you for the insight today. It was really good. We are facing a time in America where everybody is going to have to stand up. It's not going to be one man or a few people. It's going to be all of us to see this republic saved. Thank you for everything you have been doing. to expose evil and to give us the solutions as well. Blessings to you, and I look forward to having you on again. Keep up the fight.
Thank you, Matt. Happy Independence Day.
Happy Independence Day. Well, Jasper, senior editor to the New American Magazine. Got a few bits of breaking news right now. Just in, Democrats calling for Biden to step down. Representative Lloyd Daggett from Texas, Tim Ryan, former Ohio Congressman, Jason Newis, Massachusetts State Senator, Julian Castro, former Housing Secretary in the Obama administration. So the tidal wave is beginning. Also, according to Democrat polling numbers, it looks like they are at 180, while Republicans are at 358 for the Electoral College right now. You're seeing a ship sinking in real time. And lastly, just in as well, it looks like Hunter Biden has been part of these meetings. Biden said, quote, it wasn't very smart for traveling around the world a couple of times shortly before the debate. I didn't listen to my staff, and then I almost fell asleep on stage. Biden blames exhaustion after global travel for the poor debate performance. Everybody else kind of knows what actually is happening. We are in tumultuous times, just like we talked about here a few months ago. It is very likely that Biden will be replaced in the next few weeks, and that they are aiming for Michelle Obama. You are going to see Newsom try to step up. You're going to see RFK Jr. try to step up. But I believe their candidate is Michelle Obama. And they're going to try to pull something out of their hat at the last minute here and salvage this presidential campaign. But it seems like it's too far gone at this point. And that means they are going to ramp up for violence after the election, similar to 2016, maybe up into what happened in 2020, but we're going to keep our eyes on a few of those organizations, and we will be the first to let you know what's going on here locally as well. This is Matt Shea. Thank you so much for joining us on a packed Patriot Radio today. May God bless all of you. He is making this generation the greatest one. The awakening is here. Keep up the fight.